There are moments in life when everything you know falls away, and what remains is only the instinct to survive. For Kira, survival had become a language she spoke fluently. She knew the weight of hunger, the sting of cold pavement against her skin, the hollow ache of nights spent beneath bridges where the city's forgotten gathered like ghosts. She had learned to move through the world unseen, a shadow among shadows, her existence reduced to the bare mechanics of breathing, walking, enduring. She had not always been this way. Once, there had been a home, a mother who sang while washing dishes, a father who worked late but always came back smiling. Once, there had been warmth. But that was before the accident, before the hospital bills piled higher than hope, before her mother's grief turned inward and her father's hands, once gentle, became heavy with rage, before the night she ran, clutching nothing but the clothes on her back and the certainty that she could not go home again. Now, at 19, Kira had been homeless for 3 years. 3 years of sleeping in shelters when she could, alleys when she couldn't. 3 years of washing her face in gas station bathrooms and eating from dumpsters behind restaurants that threw away more food than she'd seen in weeks. 3 years of learning that kindness was rare and trust was a luxury she could not afford. The city did not care. It moved around her, indifferent and bright, its towers glittering with lives she would never touch. She had become part of its forgotten infrastructure, another crack in the pavement, another name no one would remember. But tonight, something shifted. It was late, the kind of late where even the streets grew quiet, where the hum of traffic thinned to a whisper and the world felt like it was holding its breath. Kira had found shelter in an abandoned building on the edge of the warehouse district, a place she'd slept in before. The windows were broken, the floors littered with debris, but it was dry and dark and haze for the night. She had just settled into a corner, her jacket pulled tight around her shoulders, when she heard it, a sound, soft, almost imperceptible. But there, a whimper. Kira froze. Her body went rigid, every nerve alert. She had learned to listen to the world in ways others didn't. A footstep too close, a voice too loud, the scrape of metal against stone. Sounds that meant danger, sounds that meant run. But this was different. This was fear. She moved slowly, her breath shallow, her eyes adjusting to the dim light filtering through the broken windows. The sound came again, faint and trembling, from somewhere deeper in the building. Kira hesitated. Every instinct told her to leave, to walk away, to not get involved. But she didn't. She couldn't. She moved toward the sound, her footsteps silent on the concrete floor. The building stretched out before her, vast and hollow, its walls covered in graffiti and time. She passed through rooms filled with nothing but shadows, her heart pounding in her chest, until she reached what looked like an old storage area. And there, beneath a rusted metal table, she saw her, a little girl, no more than 7 or 8 years old, curled into herself, her small body shaking. Her clothes were torn, her knees scraped and bleeding. Her face was streaked with dirt and tears, her eyes wide and glassy with terror. She clutched something in her hands, a small stuffed bear, its fur matted and worn. Kira's chest tightened. She had seen pain before. She had lived it. But this was different. This was a child who should have been safe, a child who should have been home. Kira knelt down slowly, her movements careful, her voice low. "Hey," she whispered. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The girl flinched, pressing herself further into the shadows beneath the table. Her breathing was rapid, panicked. She didn't speak. She didn't look at Kira. She just shook. Kira's mind raced. She didn't know what to do. She had no phone, no money, no way to help. But she couldn't leave. Not now. Not like this. "What's your name?" Kira asked softly. The girl didn't answer. Kira tried again. You hurt?" Still nothing. Then, slowly, the girl's trembling hand reached out. She held something toward Kira. A phone. Expensive. Sleek. Completely out of place in this broken building. Kira took it carefully, her fingers brushing against the girl's small hand. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. There was one contact saved. One name. Asterisk asterisk father dot asterisk asterisk. Kira stayed at the phone. She didn't know who this girl was. Didn't know what had happened. But she knew, in that moment, that this child was more than lost. She was running from something. Or someone. Before we go on, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below. Kira's thumb hovered over the screen. She didn't know what calling this number would mean. Didn't know who would answer. But the girl's eyes, those wide, terrified eyes, told her everything she needed to know. She pressed call. The line rang once. Twice. Then a voice answered. Deep. Controlled. But edged with something cold. Who is this? Kira swallowed. Her mouth was dry. I found a little girl. She's hurt. She's scared. I don't know what happened, but she had this phone, and… Where is she? The voice cut through her words like a blade. It was not a question. It was a command. Kira told him the address. The abandoned building. The warehouse district. She spoke quickly, her hands shaking, unsure if she was doing the right thing or making the worst mistake of her life. There was silence on the other end. Then, quietly, the voice said, Stay there. Don't let her out of your sight. The line went dead. Kira stayed at the phone. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She looked down at the girl, who had stopped shaking but was still curled beneath the table, her small fingers gripping the bear like it was the only thing tethering her to the world. Kira sat down on the cold floor beside the table. She didn't know what was coming. Didn't know who this man was or what he would do when he arrived. But she stayed. Because sometimes survival isn't just about yourself. Sometimes it's about the ones who can't survive alone. And as the minutes stretched into an unbearable silence, Kira realized that her life, this fragile, forgotten life, had just collided with something far bigger than herself. Something that would change everything. Time moved strangely in the dark. Kira sat beside the table, her back against the cold concrete wall, her eyes fixed on the small shape huddled beneath the metal frame. The girl had stopped crying, but she hadn't moved. She just lay there, curled tight, her breathing shallow and uneven. Kira didn't know how long they waited. 10 minutes. 20. It felt like hours. The silence pressed down on them, heavy and thick, broken only by the distant sound of cars passing on the street outside. She thought about running, about leaving the girl there and disappearing back into the night. But she couldn't. Something in those wide, terrified eyes had anchored her in place. Something that reminded her of herself, of the girl she used to be before the world broke her down into someone who knew how to vanish. Then she heard it. Footsteps. Not hesitant. Not searching. Purposeful. Fast. Kira's heart lurched. She stood up, her body tense, her eyes darting toward the entrance of the storage room. The footsteps grew louder, echoing through the hollow building, and then he appeared. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark coat that seemed to absorb the shadows around him. His face was sharp, carved from stone, his jaw tight, and his eyes, his eyes, were the kind that could cut through steel. They swept the room in an instant, missing nothing, and then they locked onto the girl beneath the table. Everything about him stilled. Kira watched as his expression shifted, just for a moment, from cold control to something raw, something broken. He moved toward the table, dropping to his knees, his large hands reaching out slowly, carefully, as though the girl might shatter if he touched her too quickly. "Ilara," he said, his voice low and rough. "It's me. It's father." The girl's head lifted, her tear-streaked face turned toward him, and for a moment she just stared. Then, with a sob that tore through the silence, she crawled out from under the table and threw herself into his arms. He caught her, held her. His hands cradled her small body against his chest, and he closed his eyes, his jaw clenched so tightly that Kira could see the muscle ticking beneath his skin. He didn't speak. He just held her, his breath uneven, his entire being focused on the child in his arms. Kira stood frozen, watching. She didn't know who this man was, but she knew power when she saw it. It radiated from him like heat. Dangerous. Controlled. Absolute. After a long moment, he opened his eyes and looked at Kira. She felt the weight of that gaze. It was sharp. Assessing. Not unkind, but not soft either. "You cold," he said. Kira nodded. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. She was alone. She was hurt. "I didn't know what else to do." He studied her for a moment longer, his eyes moving over her, the torn jacket, the dote on her hands, the exhaustion etched into her face. She knew what he saw. A girl with nothing. A girl who didn't matter. But when he spoke again, his voice was steady. "Thank you." Kira blinked. She hadn't expected that. He stood, lifting Alara with him as though she weighed nothing. The girl clung to him, her face buried in his shoulder, her small hands fisted in his coat. He turned to leave, and Kira thought that would be the end of it, that he would walk away, and she would go back to being invisible. But he stopped. He turned back toward her, his eyes narrowing slightly. "What's your name?" "Kira." He nodded once. Then, without another word, he walked out of the building, his daughter safe in his arms. Kira stood there in the empty room, her heart still pounding, her mind spinning. She didn't know what had just happened, didn't know who that man was or why his daughter had been alone in an abandoned building. But she knew one thing. Her life had just changed, and she had no idea how. She left the building shortly after, slipping back into the night, back into the rhythm of survival. She walked through the streets, her hands shoved deep into her pockets, her mind replaying the moment over and over. The way he had looked at his daughter, the way his voice had cracked, just slightly, when he said her name. Kira had spent years learning not to care, not to get involved, not to hope. But tonight, something had broken through. She returned to her usual spot beneath an overpass, a place where a few others had gathered, huddled around a small fire burning in a metal barrel. She sat down on the cold ground, pulling her jacket tighter around her shoulders, and stared into the flames. She didn't know that across the city, in a penthouse high above the streets, a man named Rafael Navarro sat in a darkened room, his daughter asleep in his arms, and made a decision. She didn't know that he had already learned everything about her. Where she slept, how long she'd been on the streets, the family she'd run from. She didn't know that he had decided she would never sleep on the streets again, because Rafael Navarro did not forget debts. And Kira had just saved the only thing in the world that mattered to him. The next morning, Kira woke to the sound of voices. She opened her eyes slowly, disoriented, and found herself staring up at a man in a dark suit. Behind him, two others stood, their faces impassive, their hands folded in front of them. "Miss Kira," the man said, his voice polite but firm. "Mr. Navarro would like to speak with you." Kira's stomach dropped. She sat up quickly, her heart racing. I don't. It's not a request." She looked around. The others who had been sleeping nearby were gone. Vanished. It was just her and these men. She had no choice. They led her to a black car parked at the edge of the underpass. She climbed into the back seat, her hands trembling, her mind spinning with fear and confusion. The car pulled away from the cab, moving smoothly through the city streets, and Kira pressed herself into the corner, trying to make herself small. They drove for what felt like forever. Out of the grimy streets she knew, through neighborhoods that grew cleaner, brighter, wealthier, until finally they stopped in front of a towering building that gleamed in the morning light. The man opened her door. "This way." Kira followed, her legs shaking. They entered the building, crossed a marble lobby, and stepped into an elevator that rose so fast her stomach lurched. When the doors opened, she stepped out into a hallway lined with expensive art and soft lighting. At the end of the hall, a door stood open. Inside, Rafael Navarro waited. He stood by the window, his back to her, his hands clasped behind him. He didn't turn when she entered. "Close the door," he said. Kira did. Then, slowly, he turned to face her. His eyes were the same as they had been the night before, sharp, calculating, unreadable. But there was something else there now. Something quieter. "You saved my daughter," he said. Kira swallowed. You could have walked away." She didn't know what to say. He stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "I don't forget the people who helped me. And I don't leave debts unpaid." Kira's heart pounded. "I don't want anything." "That's not how this works." He moved to a desk and picked up a folder. He opened it, glanced at the contents, then looked back at her. "You're 19. No family. No home. No money. You've been living on the streets for 3 years." Her breath caught. How did he? "I know everything about you, Kira," he said quietly, "and I'm going to make you an offer." She stared at him, her mind reeling. "You can go back to the streets," he continued, "or you can stay here." "Stay. In my home. Under my protection. You'll have a room. Food. Safety. Everything you need." Kira's head spun. "Why?" His expression didn't change. "Because you saved Alara. And because I don't let the people I owe disappear." She didn't know what to say. Didn't know if this was real or some kind of trap. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw something she hadn't expected. Sincerity. And so, without fully understanding what she was agreeing to, Kira nodded. And her life as she knew it ended. The room they gave her was larger than any place she had ever slept. It had a bed with clean sheets, a window that overlooked the city, and a bathroom with running water that didn't smell like rust and decay. Kira stood in the doorway, staring at it all, unable to move. It didn't feel real. A woman appeared behind her, older, with kind eyes and a calm demeanor. She introduced herself as Teresa, the housekeeper. She spoke gently, as though she understood that Kira was not used to this, not used to softness. "You can shower," Teresa said. "I'll bring you clean clothes." Kira nodded, still unable to speak. She stepped into the bathroom and closed the door. For a long moment, she just stood there, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her face was gaunt, her hair tangled and dainty, her eyes hollow. She barely recognized herself. She turned on the shower. The water was hot, almost too hot. She stepped under the spray and felt 3 years of grime and exhaustion wash away. She scrubbed her skin until it was raw, as though she could scrub away the memory of every cold night, every empty stomach, every moment she had felt invisible. When she finally stepped out, Teresa had left clothes on the bed. Simple, comfortable, clean. Kira dressed slowly, her hands shaking. She didn't know what came next. Didn't know what this man, Raphael, wanted from her. But for the first time in years, she felt warm. She left the room cautiously, stepping into the hallway. The penthouse was vast, filled with expensive furniture and art that probably cost more than anything she'd ever owned in her life. She wandered through it, her footsteps soft on the marble floors, until she heard voices. She followed the sound to a large living area. Raphael stood near the window, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and sharp. Across the room, Alara sat on the floor, coloring in a book, her small legs crossed beneath her. Kira hesitated, unsure if she should enter. But Alara looked up and saw her. The girl's face brightened. She set down her crayon and stood, crossing the room quickly. She stopped in front of Kira, her wide eyes staring up at her. "You're here," Alara said softly. Kira nodded. "Yeah." Alara smiled. It was small, tentative, but it was there. "Thank you for finding me." Kira's chest tightened. She crouched down so she was eye level with the girl. "You're safe now." Alara nodded. Then, without warning, she stepped forward and wrapped her small arms around Kira's neck. Kira froze. She didn't know how to respond. She hadn't been hugged in years, hadn't felt the warmth of another person's affection in so long that she'd forgotten what it felt like. Slowly, carefully, she lifted her arms and hugged the girl back. Behind them, Raphael ended his call. He turned and watched them, his expression unreadable. Ilara pulled back and smiled again. Do you want to color with me? Kira glanced at Raphael, unsure. He nodded once. And so Kira sat down on the floor beside Ilara, picking up a crayon, and for the first time in years, she did something that wasn't about survival. She simply existed. If this story has already found a place in your heart, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below for more stories that stay long after they end. The days that followed were strange. Kira moved through the penthouse like a ghost, unsure of her place, unsure of her purpose. Raphael was often gone, disappearing for hours at a time, returning late with a tension in his shoulders that spoke of things she didn't understand. But Ilara was always there. The girl followed Kira everywhere. She sat beside her at meals, curled up next to her on the couch, asked her questions about anything and everything. Kira didn't know how to be around a child, didn't know how to answer questions about hope and dreams when she'd spent so long forgetting she had any. But Ilara didn't seem to mind. One evening, after Raphael had returned and disappeared into his office, Kira found herself alone with Ilara in the girl's room. Ilara was sitting on her bed, clutching the same worn bear sheet had the night Kira found her. What's his name? Kira asked, nodding at the bear. Mr. Bear, Ilara said simply. Kira smiled. That's a good name. Ilara looked down at the bear, her fingers tracing the matted fur. My mother gave him to me. Kira's smile faded. Where is she? Ilara's face grew quiet. She's gone. Kira didn't ask what that meant. She didn't need to. She knew loss when she saw it. Father says she's in a better place, Ilara continued softly. But I miss her. Kira sat down beside her on the bed. It's okay to miss people. Ilara looked up at her. Do you miss anyone? Kira hesitated. She thought of her mother, her father, the life she used to have. Yeah, she said quietly. I do. Ilara leaned against her, resting her head on Kira's shoulder. I'm glad you're here. Kira's throat tightened. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to explain that she didn't belong here, that she was just a stranger who had stumbled into their lives by accident. But she didn't say any of that. She just sat there, with this small girl leaning against her, and let herself feel something she hadn't felt in years. Needed. Later that night, after Ilara had fallen asleep, Kira found Raphael in the living room. He sat in a chair by the window, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his gaze fixed on the city lights below. She almost turned around and left, but he spoke before she could. You're good with her. Kira stopped. She's easy to be around. Raphael took a sip of his drink. She hasn't smiled like that in months. Kira didn't know what to say. He turned his head slightly, looking at her. You don't have to be afraid here. I'm not afraid. His eyes narrowed. You are. I can see it. Kira's jaw tightened. I don't know what you want from me. Nothing. She didn't believe him. He set his glass down and stood, crossing the room until he was standing in front of her. He was taller than she'd realized, broader. His presence filled the space between them, commanding and impossible to ignore. I don't want anything from you, Kira, he said quietly, but I won't let you leave. Her breath caught. What? You're staying here, under my protection. That's not negotiable. You can't just. I can. His voice was calm, final. Kira stared at him, her heart pounding. Why? He didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, his gaze steady and unyielding. Then, softly, he said, because you saved her, and because I don't let go of the people who matter. Kira's chest tightened. She didn't know if she mattered, didn't know if she ever had. But as Raphael turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the dim light, she realized something. She was no longer invisible, and that terrified her more than anything. The days turned into weeks. Kira settled into the penthouse, though settled wasn't quite the right word. She existed within it, moving carefully through its spaces, always aware that this was not her world, that she was a guest, Or perhaps something else. Something she couldn't quite name. Raphael came and went like the tide. Sometimes he was there, seated at the head of the dinner table, his presence filling the room even when he didn't speak. Other times, he vanished for days, and the penthouse grew quieter, emptier, as though his absence left a void that nothing could fill. Kira learned not to ask where he went. Learned not to wonder about the phone calls he took in his office, his voice low and sharp, or the men in dark suits who sometimes appeared at the door, speaking in hushed tones before disappearing again. She learned that there were things about Rafael Navarro that were better left unknown. But Ilara was different. The girl had latched onto Kira with a fierce, quiet devotion. She followed her through the penthouse, asked her to read stories, to color, to sit beside her while she ate. Kira had never been responsible for anyone before, had never been needed, and though it frightened her, though she didn't know how to be what Ilara needed, she tried. Because Ilara looked at her like she mattered. One afternoon, Kira sat on the floor of Ilara's room while the girl arranged her stuffed animals in a circle. Mr. Bear sat at the center, his matted fur catching the light from the window. "They are having a meeting," Ilara explained seriously. Kira smiled. "About what?" "Important things. Like who gets the last cookie." Kira laughed softly. It felt strange. Foreign. She couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed. Ilara looked up at her, her face bright. "You should laugh more." Kira's smile faded. "Maybe." Ilara set down the stuffed giraffe she was holding and moved closer to Kira. She sat down beside her, her small hands folding in her lap. "Are you sad?" Kira hesitated. "Sometimes." "Me too." Kira looked at the girl, at the quiet weight in her eyes, and felt something twist in her chest. "What makes you sad?" Ilara was quiet for a moment. Then, softly, she said, "I miss my mother." Kira's throat tightened. "I'm sorry." "Father says she's watching over me," Ilara continued. "But I don't know if that's true. I can't see her." Kira didn't know what to say. She had never been good with words, never been good at comfort. But she reached out and placed her hand on Ilara's small shoulder, and the girl leaned into her. "I think she is," Kira said quietly. "I think she's proud of you." Ilara looked up at her, her eyes shining. "Do you think so?" Kira nodded, and for a moment, they sat there together, two people carrying grief they couldn't name, finding something small and fragile in each other's presence. If you've ever felt torn between fear and love, you'll understand her. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below. Your support keeps stories like this alive. That evening, Raphael returned. Kira heard the door open, heard the low murmur of voices in the hallway. She stayed in her room, unsure if he wanted to see her, unsure if she wanted to see him. But an hour later, there was a knock on her door. She opened it to find Raphael standing there, still dressed in his coat, his face shadowed with exhaustion. "Come with me," he said. Kira hesitated. "Where?" "Just come." She followed him through the penthouse, down the hallway, past the living room, until they reached a set of double doors she had never seen opened. He pushed them open, and she stepped inside. It was a library. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined the walls, filled with books. Thousands of them. The room smelled of paper and leather, and a fire burned low in the hearth, casting warm light across the space. Kira stared. "I didn't know this was he." "No one does," Raphael said. "It was my wife's." Kira turned to look at him. He stood by the fireplace, his hands in his pockets, his gaze distant. "She loved to read," he continued quietly. "Spent hours in here. Said books were the only place she felt free." Kira didn't know what to say. Raphael looked at her then, his eyes softer than she'd ever seen them. "I want you to have it." Kira blinked. "What?" "The library. Use it. Read. Stay here as long as you want." "I don't understand." He stepped closer, his gaze steady. "You've given Ilara something I couldn't. You've made her smile again. Made her feel safe. I don't know how to repay that, but I can give you this. Kira's chest tightened. You don't owe me anything. I do. She shook her head. You've already done more than. Kira. His voice stopped her. Let me give you this. She stared at him, at the quiet intensity in his eyes, and realized something. He wasn't used to asking. He was used to taking, to commanding, to controlling. But right now, he was asking. And she didn't know how to say no. Okay, she whispered. He nodded once. Then, without another word, he turned and left. Kira stood alone in the library, surrounded by books she'd never read, in a life she didn't understand, and for the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she could stay. The next morning, Kira woke to the sound of rain against the windows. She dressed and made her way to the kitchen, where Teresa was already preparing breakfast. Ilara sat at the table, her legs swinging beneath her chair, her face bright despite the gray sky outside. Good morning. Ilara chirped. Kira smiled. Good morning. She sat down beside the girl, and Teresa placed a plate in front of her. Eggs, toast, fruit, more food than Kira used to eat in a week. Ilara leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Father says we can go to the park today if the rain stops. Kira glanced toward the window. It doesn't look like it's stopping. It will, Ilara said confidently. I wished for it. Kira smiled. Did you? Yep, and my wishes always come true. Kira didn't have the heart to tell her otherwise. But an hour later, the rain stopped, and when Raphael appeared in the doorway, his coat slung over his shoulder, Ilara jumped up with a squeal. I told you, she said, grinning at Kira. Raphael's eyes flicked to Kira, something unreadable passing through them. Get your jacket. They went to the park. All three of them. Raphael walked beside Kira while Ilara ran ahead, chasing pigeons and laughing in a way that made Kira's chest ache. She glanced at Raphael, at the way he watched his daughter, his expression softer than she'd ever seen. She loves you, Kira said quietly. Raphael didn't look at her. She's all I have. She knows. He was silent for a moment. Then, she loves you too. Kira's breath caught. She barely knows me. Doesn't matter. He looked at her then, his gaze piercing. You make her feel safe. That's all she needs. Kira didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to explain that she didn't know how to be what Ilara needed. That she was still just a girl who'd spent years learning how to disappear. But Raphael was already turning away, his attention back on his daughter. And Kira realized, as she watched them together, that maybe she didn't need to know. Maybe she just needed to stay. Time passed in a way that felt both too fast and too slow. Kira woke each morning in her room, the soft light filtering through the curtains, and for a moment she forgot where she was. Forgot that this was her life now. That she no longer slept on cold pavement or woke to the sound of strangers arguing in the dark. She had a bed. She had food. She had safety. But safety, she was learning, came with a price. Raphael's world was not one of simplicity. It was layered, complex, filled with shadows that stretched long even in the brightest light. She saw it in the way men came and went from the penthouse, their faces hard and unreadable. She saw it in the way Raphael's phone rang at all hours, his voice dropping to a tone that made her skin prickle. She saw it in the way he sometimes looked at her, as though he was calculating something she couldn't see. She didn't ask questions. She had learned, long ago, that curiosity could be dangerous. But Ilara asked everything. Why does father always leave? She asked one afternoon as they sat in the library, Kira reading aloud from a worn copy of a fairy tale. Kira hesitated. He has work. What kind of work? Important work. Ilara frowned. But why can't he stay? Kira closed the book. Because sometimes people have to do things they don't want to do, to keep the people they love safe. Ilara thought about this for a moment. Then, quietly, do you think he's safe? Kira's chest tightened. I think he knows how to take care of himself. Elara nodded, though she didn't look convinced. She leaned against Kira, her small body warm and trusting, and Kira felt the weight of it, the responsibility, the fear that she would fail this girl somehow, that she would fail Raphael. That night, Kira couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind spinning with thoughts she couldn't untangle. She finally gave up and slipped out of her room, moving quietly through the darkened penthouse. She didn't expect to find Raphael awake, but he was. He stood in the living room, silhouetted against the windows, his hands braced on the glass. He didn't turn when she entered, but she knew he'd heard her. "Can't sleep?" he asked. Kira stopped a few feet behind him. "No, neither can I." She didn't know what to say, didn't know why she'd come out here in the first place. Raphael turned then, his face half in shadow, half in the faint glow of the city lights. He looked tired, more tired than she'd ever seen him. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. Kira frowned. "Regret what?" "Calling me that night." She stared at him. "No, you should." "Why?" He stepped closer, his gaze intense. "Because you're trapped here now. Because I won't let you leave. Because you've become part of something you don't understand." Kira's heart pounded. "I saved your daughter. I don't regret that." "You saved her," he agreed. "But you also saved me." She didn't know what to say. Raphael's jaw tightened. "I don't let people in, Kira. I don't let them close. Because everyone I've ever cared about has been hurt, or used, or taken from me." Kira's breath caught. "Then why did you bring me here?" "Because I owe you." "That's not a reason to keep me." "It's the only reason I have." She stared at him, at the rawness in his eyes, and realized something. He was afraid, not of her, but of what she represented, of letting someone matter. If your heart's racing too, take a breath. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below for more unforgettable love stories. The weeks that followed were heavier, darker. Raphael's absences grew longer, his returns more tense. Kira saw the strain in his shoulders, the tightness in his jaw. She heard the arguments behind closed doors, the sharp voices, the silences that followed. She didn't ask, but she felt it. One night, Raphael returned late, his coat splattered with rain, his face pale. He didn't say anything, just walked past her, straight to his office, and closed the door. Kira stood in the hallway, her heart pounding. Something was wrong. She didn't know what, but she felt it. She went to Elara's room and found the girl asleep, her small hand clutching Mr. Bear. Kira sat down on the edge of the bed, watching her, and felt a fierce, desperate need to protect her, to protect them both. But from what? She didn't know. The next morning, Raphael didn't come out of his office. Teresa brought him coffee, knocked softly, and received no answer. Elara asked where he was, and Kira told her he was working, but she knew it was more than that. That evening, Kira found herself standing outside his office door. She raised her hand to knock, hesitated, then pushed the door open. Raphael sat at his desk, his head in his hands. Papers were scattered across the surface, his phone face down beside them. He looked up when she entered, his eyes bloodshot and hollow. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "Neither should you." He didn't respond. Kira stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "What's happening?" "Nothing you need to worry about." "That's not an answer." Raphael's jaw clenched. "Leave it, Kira." "No." He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You don't understand what you're asking." "Then tell me." "I can't." "Why?" "Because the more you know, the more danger you're in." Kira's breath caught. "I'm already in danger, aren't I?" Raphael didn't answer, and that silence told her everything. She stepped closer, her voice steady. "Then let me help." "You can't help with this." Why not? Because this isn't your world. It is now. Raphael stared at her, something shifting in his expression. Something raw and unguarded. You don't know what you're saying, he said quietly. I do. Kira. I'm not leaving. He closed his eyes, his hands clenching into fists. You should. But I won't. When he opened his eyes again, the intensity in them nearly undid her. You're going to regret this, he said softly. Maybe, but I'm staying anyway. And for the first time since she'd arrived, Raphael didn't argue. He just nodded, and Kira realized, in that moment, that she wasn't just staying for Ilara anymore. She was staying for him. The following days brought a shift in the air. Raphael didn't push her away, but he didn't pull her closer either. He existed in a space between, allowing her presence but never quite acknowledging what it meant. Kira understood. She had spent years building walls around herself, learning to keep people at a distance. She recognized the architecture of his defenses because they mirrored her own. But Ilara noticed the change. Father smiles more when you're here, she said one afternoon as they sat in the library, sunlight streaming through the tall windows. Kira looked up from the book she was reading. Does he? Ilara nodded seriously. He used to be sad all the time, even when he pretended he wasn't. But now he's different. Kira's chest tightened. People change slowly. Do you think he's happy? The question hung in the air between them. Kira thought about Raphael, the weight he carried, the shadows that followed him, the moments when his guard dropped just enough for her to see the exhaustion beneath. I think he's trying to be, Kira said finally. Ilara seemed satisfied with this answer. She returned to her drawing, her small hand moving across the paper with careful concentration. Kira watched her, this child who had somehow become the center of her world, and felt something unfamiliar blooming in her chest. Love. Not the desperate, clinging kind, but something quieter, steadier, the kind that made you want to stay even when leaving would be easier. That evening, Raphael asked her to join him for dinner. Just the two of them. Ilara had already eaten and was in her room, and Teresa had prepared something simple, pasta, wine, the kind of meal that felt intimate without trying. They ate in silence for a while, the only sound the soft clink of silverware against plates. Then Raphael spoke. I need to tell you something. Kira set down her fork. Okay. He looked at her, his eyes serious. The night you found Ilara, she wasn't just lost. She was taken. Kira's blood ran cold. What? Men broke into our previous home. They were sent to hurt me, to send a message. His jaw clenched. They took her instead. My God. She escaped, ran, hid in that building until you found her. Raphael's hands tightened around his wine glass. If you hadn't been there. But I was. Yes. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw the vulnerability there, the fear. You saved her life, and for that, I will never let anything happen to you. Kira's throat tightened. Is that why you won't let me leave? Because you're protecting me? Partly. What's the other part? Raphael was quiet for a long moment. Then, so softly she almost didn't hear it, because I don't want you to. The word settled between them, heavy and honest. Kira's heart pounded. I don't know how to be what you need. You already are. I'm nobody, Raphael. I'm just. You're not nobody. His voice was firm. Not to her. Not to me. Kira stared at him, at the intensity in his dark eyes, and felt something crack open inside her. Something she'd kept locked away for years. Hope. Before we close this chapter, take a moment, like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below. Every small gesture helps the next story find its way to you. The next few weeks passed in a strange, suspended kind of peace. Raphael was home more often. He worked from his office, took calls behind closed doors, but he emerged for meals, for Ilara's bedtime, for quiet moments in the library where he would sit across from Kira and simply exist in the same space. They didn't talk much during those times, but they didn't need to. Kira found herself noticing things about him. The way he rubbed his temples when he was tired. The way his accent thickened when he was frustrated. The way he looked at Alara with such fierce, protective love that it made Kira's chest ache. And she found herself noticing the way he looked at her, too. Not with the calculating assessment of those first days, but with something softer. Something that made her pulse quicken and her thoughts scatter. One night, after Alara was asleep, Kira stood on the balcony, looking out over the city. The lights stretched endlessly before her, a sea of lives she would never touch, stories she would never know. She heard the door open behind her. Raphael stepped out onto the balcony, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He stood beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. "Yes." But when she glanced at him, he wasn't looking at the city. He was looking at her. Her breath caught. "Kira," he said, his voice low, "I need you to understand something." "What?" "The world I live in, it's dangerous, complicated. People want to hurt me, and they'll use anyone I care about to do it." "I know." "Do you?" He turned to face her fully. "Do you understand that staying here means you're a target? That anyone who wants to get to me will come for you?" Kira met his gaze steadily. "I understand." "And you still want to stay?" "Yes." "Why?" The question hung between them, simple and impossible. Kira thought about all the reasons she could give. Because of Alara. Because she had nowhere else to go. Because he'd given her safety when she had none. But none of those were the whole truth. "Because I want to," she said finally. Raphael's eyes darkened. He stepped closer, his hand reaching up to brush a strand of hair from her face. His touch was careful, gentle, as though she might break. "You should be afraid of me," he murmured. "I'm not." "You should be." "But I'm not." His thumb traced along her jaw, and Kira's heart hammered in her chest. She'd never been touched like this, never been looked at like this, like she mattered, like she was something precious. "Kira," he breathed, and then he kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, as though he was giving her time to pull away. But Kira didn't pull away. She leaned into him, her hands finding his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. The kiss deepened, and Kira felt years of loneliness, of fear, of emptiness falling away. She felt alive. She felt seen. She felt wanted. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Raphael rested his forehead against hers. "This changes everything," he said quietly. "I know." "Are you sure?" Kira pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. "Yes." And she was. Because for the first time in her life, she wasn't running. She was choosing to stay. The morning after the kiss, Kira woke with her heart still racing. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over. The feel of Raphael's hands on her face, the warmth of his breath, the way he'd looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. She didn't know what happened next. Didn't know if things would change or if he would pretend it never happened. But when she finally emerged from her room, she found Raphael in the kitchen, making coffee. He looked up when she entered, and something soft crossed his face. "Good morning," he said. "Morning." He poured her a cup without asking, added cream the way she liked it, and handed it to her. Their fingers brushed, and the touch sent electricity up her arm. "Did you sleep well?" he asked. "Yes." It was a lie. She'd barely slept at all. Raphael's mouth curved into a small smile, as though he knew. "Good." Alara bounded into the kitchen a moment later, her hair messy from sleep, Mr. Bear tucked under her arm. She climbed onto a chair and grinned at them both. "Are we doing something fun today?" she asked hopefully. Raphael glanced at Kira. "What do you think?" Kira blinked. He was asking her, including her in the decision. "I think," she said slowly, We should do whatever Ilara wants. Ilara's face lit up. The aquarium. Raphael raised an eyebrow. The aquarium. Please? I want to see the sharks. Raphael looked at Kira again, and she saw the question in his eyes. She nodded. All right, Raphael said. The aquarium it is. Ilara squealed and jumped down from her chair, running off to get dressed. Raphael watched her go, then turned back to Kira. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For making her happy. Kira's chest tightened. She makes it easy. So do you. The words hung between them, warm and honest. And Kira realized that this quiet domesticity, this shared moment over coffee, was something she'd never thought she'd have. Something she'd never thought she deserved. They spent the day at the aquarium. Ilara ran from exhibit to exhibit, her face pressed against the glass, her eyes wide with wonder. Raphael followed behind, his hands in his pockets, his expression softer than Kira had ever seen. And Kira walked beside him, feeling lighter than she had in years. At one point, Ilara grabbed both their hands, pulling them toward the shark tank. She stood between them, clutching their fingers tightly, and pointed at the massive creatures gliding through the water. They are beautiful, she breathed. Kira looked down at the girl, then up at Raphael. He was already watching her, his eyes dark and unreadable. But when Ilara squeezed their hands tighter, pulling them closer together, Raphael didn't let go. And neither did Kira. That night, after Ilara was in bed, Kira found Raphael on the balcony again. He stood with his back to her, his shoulders tense. Are you okay? She asked. He didn't turn around. I'm thinking. About what? About how much I have to lose. Kira stepped closer. You don't have to lose anything. Don't I? He finally turned to face her. The people who took Ilara are still out there. They are waiting, watching, and now you're part of this too. I knew that when I stayed. Knowing it and living it are different things. I can handle it. Raphael's jaw clenched. You shouldn't have to. Kira moved until she was standing directly in front of him. But I am, and I'm not leaving. So stop trying to push me away. I'm trying to protect you. Then protect me, but don't push me away. Raphael stared at her, his eyes searching hers. Then, slowly, he reached out and pulled her into his arms. Kira went willingly, pressing her face against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. His arms wrapped around her, strong and secure, and for the first time in years, she felt truly safe. I don't know how to do this, Raphael murmured into her hair. Neither do I. Then we'll figure it out together. Kira pulled back just enough to look up at him. Together. Raphael's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheek. I'm going to keep you safe, no matter what. I know. And she did, because Raphael Navarro was a man who kept his promises, even if it cost him everything. The days that followed were different. Softer. Raphael was still gone sometimes, still took calls behind closed doors, still carried the weight of whatever world he navigated beyond the penthouse walls. But when he was home, he was present. He ate breakfast with them, read to Ilara at night, sat beside Kira in the library, their shoulders touching, their silence comfortable. And at night, when the city grew quiet, he would find her on the balcony, or in the kitchen, or sitting alone in her room, and he would stay. They didn't always talk. Sometimes they just existed together, two people learning how to let someone in. But slowly, carefully, something between them grew. Kira found herself watching him when he wasn't looking, the way he smiled at his daughter, the way his hands moved when he worked, the way his eyes would find hers across a room, as though checking to make sure she was still there. And she was. Always. One evening, after Ilara had gone to bed, Raphael pulled Kira into his office. He closed the door behind them and turned to face her, his expression serious. I need to show you something, he said. Kira's stomach tightened. What? He moved to his desk and opened a drawer, pulling out a small black box. He handed it to her. She opened it slowly. Inside was a phone. Sleek. Expensive. Brand new. "It's yours," Raphael said. "My number is already programmed in. So is Teresa's. And the security team's." Kira stated it. "Why?" "Because if anything happens, if you're ever in danger, I need to know you can reach me." "Nothing's going to happen." "You don't know that." Kira looked up at him. "Raphael." "Please." His voice was quiet, almost pleading. "Just take it. For me." Kira nodded slowly. "Okay." He exhaled, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. Then he reached out and took her hand, pulling her closer. "I know this isn't the life you imagined," he said quietly. "I know it's complicated, dangerous, but I need you to know that I—" He stopped, his jaw clenching. Kira's heart pounded. "What?" Raphael's eyes met hers, and in them, she saw everything he couldn't say. "I care about you," he said finally, "more than I should, more than is safe." Kira's breath caught. "Raphael." "I know it's too soon. I know we barely know each other. But I can't," he broke off, shaking his head. "I can't pretend I don't feel this." Kira stepped closer, her hand coming up to rest on his chest. "Then don't." "Kira." "I feel it too." Raphael's eyes darkened. His hand came up to cup her face, his touch gentle despite the intensity in his gaze. "You're going to destroy me," he murmured. "Or save you. Maybe both." And then he kissed her again. This time, it wasn't tentative. It wasn't careful. It was desperate and hungry and filled with all the things they couldn't say. Kira's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and Raphael backed her against the desk, his mouth never leaving hers. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Raphael rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me tonight," he whispered. Kira's heart hammered. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." And so she did. She stayed. The morning light filtered through the curtains of Raphael's room, soft and golden. Kira woke slowly, her body warm and comfortable, and it took her a moment to remember where she was. Then she felt the weight of an arm around her waist. "Raphael." She turned carefully, not wanting to wake him, and found him already awake, watching her. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi." His hand moved, tracing patterns along her spine. "Did you sleep?" "Yes." "You?" "A little." They lay there in silence, the world outside just beginning to stir, and Kira felt something settle inside her. Peace. "I have to tell you something," Raphael said quietly. Kira's stomach tightened. "What?" "The men who took Alara, I know who sent them." "Who?" "Someone from my past. Someone I thought I'd dealt with." His jaw clenched, but his back, and his not going to stop. Kira's heart raced. "What are you going to do?" "End it." "How?" Raphael's eyes met hers, and in them, she saw something cold, something dangerous. "However, I have to." Kira swallowed. "When?" "Soon." "And what happens to us?" Raphael's hand came up to cup her face. "Nothing happens to us. I'm going to make sure of it." "Raphael." "I promise you, Kira. I will keep you safe. Both of you." Kira wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that everything would be okay. But she'd learned, long ago, that promises were fragile things, and the world had a way of breaking them. Still, when Raphael pulled her close, when his lips pressed against her forehead, she let herself believe. Just for a moment. Just for now. The next few days were heavy with tension. Raphael was different, sharper, more distant, his mind clearly elsewhere. He spent hours in his office, his voice low and hard as he spoke on the phone. Men in dark suits came and went at all hours, their faces grim and unreadable. Kira tried to stay out of the way, tried to keep things normal for Alara's sake. But the girl was perceptive. She noticed the change in her father, the way his smiles didn't quite reach his eyes, the way he held her a little tighter at night. Is something wrong? Elara asked one afternoon as Kira braided her hair. Kira hesitated. Your father is just busy with work. Is he going away again? I don't know. Elara was quiet for a moment. Then, softly, I don't want him to go. Kira's chest ached. I know, sweetheart. Do you think he'll come back? The question gutted her, because the truth was, she didn't know. She didn't know what Raphael was planning, didn't know what dangers he was walking into, didn't know if the promise he'd made, that he would keep them safe, was one he could actually keep. But she couldn't tell Elara that. He always comes back, Kira said instead. He loves you too much not to. Elara nodded, but she didn't look convinced. That night, Raphael found Kira in the library. She was curled up in one of the large chairs, a book open in her lap that she wasn't actually reading. He stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her, before stepping inside. Can't focus? He asked. Kira looked up. Not really. He crossed the room and sat down on the ottoman in front of her chair, his elbows resting on his knees. He looked exhausted. When are you leaving? Kira asked quietly. Tomorrow night. Her stomach dropped. For how long? I don't know. Raphael. I have to do this, Kira. It's the only way to keep you safe. And what if something happens to you? His jaw clenched. It won't. You don't know that. I do. Kira leaned forward, her hands reaching for his. Please, just be careful. Raphael's hands tightened around hers. I will. I promise. That's what you said last time. And I came back. But what if you don't? Raphael pulled her out of the chair and into his lap, his arms wrapping around her tightly. I will always come back to you. Kira pressed her face into his neck, breathing him in, trying to memorize everything about this moment. The warmth of his skin, the steady beat of his heart, the way he held her like she was something precious. I love you, she whispered. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Raphael went still. Then, slowly, he pulled back just enough to look at her. His eyes were intense, burning with something raw and unguarded. Say that again, he said roughly. Kira's heart pounded. I love you. Raphael's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her lips. I love you too. And then he kissed her. It was different from the other times. Deeper. More desperate. Like he was trying to pour everything he felt into that one moment, trying to make her understand that no matter what happened, no matter where he went, this thing between them was real. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Raphael rested his forehead against hers. When I come back, he murmured, we're going to have a real life. All three of us. I promise you that. Kira nodded, tears burning in her eyes. Okay. Okay. They spent the rest of the night together. They didn't sleep. They just talked, held each other, memoized every detail they could. And when the sun finally began to rise, casting golden light across the room, Kira felt the weight of what was coming pressing down on her chest. Raphael left the next evening. He kissed Elara goodbye, holding her for a long moment before setting her down gently. Then he turned to Kira. He didn't say anything. He just pulled her into his arms and held her, his face buried in her hair. I'll come back, he whispered. You better. He pulled back, his hands framing her face. I love you. I love you too. And then he was gone. The penthouse felt emptier without him. Kira tried to keep things normal for Elara's sake, tried to maintain their routines, but the girl noticed. She was quieter than usual, more clingy, asking when her father would be home. Soon, Kira told her, even though she didn't know if it was true. Days passed, then a week. The phone Raphael had given her stayed silent. No calls, no messages, nothing. Kira tried not to panic. Tried to tell herself that he was fine, that he was just busy, that he would call when he could. But with each passing day, the fear grew stronger. Until, finally, late one night, the phone rang. Kira grabbed it immediately, her heart in her throat. Raphael. But it wasn't Raphael's voice that answered. It was someone else. A voice she didn't recognize. Cold. Hard. If you want to see him again, the voice said, you'll do exactly as I say. Kira's blood turned to ice. Who is this? She demanded. That doesn't matter. What matters is that Rafael Navarro is in my custody. And if you want him to stay alive, you're going to help me. What do you want? His daughter. You bring her to me, and I'll let him go. Kira's stomach churned. No. No. I'm not giving you Alara. The voice laughed. It was a terrible sound. Then I'll kill him. And then I'll come for her anyway. Kira's hands shook. You're lying. Raphael would never. He's bleeding out as we speak. You have 24 hours to decide. If you want proof, check your messages. The line went dead. Kira's hands trembled as she opened her messages. A video file had been sent. She didn't want to watch it, but she had to. She pressed play. The screen showed Raphael, bound to a chair, his face bruised and blooded. His eyes were half closed, his breathing labored. And standing behind him, a man with a gun pressed to his head. The video ended. Kira dropped the phone, her entire body shaking. Raphael was in danger, and she had no idea how to save him. Kira's mind raced. 24 hours. That was all she had. 24 hours to figure out how to save Raphael without sacrificing Alara. She couldn't do both. Or could she? She picked up the phone again, her hands still shaking, and stayed at the contacts. Raphael's security team. Teresa. The police. But calling the police felt wrong. Raphael had made it clear. His world didn't operate within the bounds of law. The people he dealt with were dangerous, connected, untouchable. Calling the authorities might get him killed faster. She needed help. But from who? Then she remembered something Raphael had said once, weeks ago, during a late-night conversation. Asterisk, if anything ever happens to me, there's someone you can trust. His name is Victor. He'll know what to do. Asterisk. Kira scrolled through the contacts frantically, and there it was. Asterisk asterisk Victor dot asterisk asterisk. She pressed call, her heart hammering. The line rang twice before a deep, accented voice answered. Who is this? My name is Kira. Raphael gave me this number. There was a pause. Where is Raphael? That's why I'm calling. He's been taken. Someone. They sent me a video. They want Alara in exchange for his life. Victor swore in a language Kira didn't understand. When? 24 hours. Where are you? At the penthouse. Stay there. Lock every door. Don't let anyone in. I'll be there in 30 minutes. The line went dead. Kira stood frozen for a moment, then sprang into action. She ran to Alara's room and found the girl sleeping peacefully, Mr. Bear tucked under her arm. Kira's chest tightened. She couldn't let anything happen to her. She wouldn't. She checked every lock, every window, turned on the security system, then sat down in the living room to wait. Victor arrived exactly 30 minutes later. He was a massive man, broad-shouldered and scarred, with eyes that had seen too much. He moved through the penthouse with military precision, checking every room, every exit, before finally sitting down across from Kira. Show me the video, he said. Kira handed him the phone. Victor watched in silence, his jaw tightening with each passing second. When it ended, he set the phone down carefully. This is Alexei Volkov, he said. An old enemy of Raphael's. We thought he was dead. Apparently not. No, apparently not. Victor's eyes met hers. He wants the girl because she's leverage. If he has her, Raphael will do anything. Give him anything. I'm not giving him Alara. I know. We won't have to. How? Victor leaned forward. You're going to call him back. Tell him you'll make the exchange. Set up a meeting. And then we're going to get Raphael out before that meeting ever happens. Kira's stomach churned. How? Leave that to me. I want to help. Victor stuttered her. You care about him? Yes. Then help by staying here and keeping the girls safe. That's what he would want. I can do more than that. Can you? Kira met his gaze steadily. Yes. Victor was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. All right. Here's what we're going to do. They spent the next hour planning. Victor made calls, gathered intel, assembled a team. And Kira listened, absorbing every detail, her mind sharp and focused. Because she wasn't the same girl who had slept on the streets months ago. She had something to fight for now. Someone to fight for. And she would do whatever it took. The next morning, Kira called the number back. The same cold voice answered. Have you made your decision? Yes. I'll bring Alara. But I want proof that Raphael is still alive. You saw the video. That was hours ago. I need to know he's alive now. There was a pause. Then, roughly, hold on. A moment later, Raphael's voice came on the line. Weak, pained, but alive. Kira. Her heart broke. I'm here. Don't. He coughed, the sound wet and terrible. Don't give them Alara. No matter what they. The line cut off. The cold voice returned. Satisfied. Kira's hands shook. Yes. Good. Tonight. Midnight. I'll send you the location. Come alone, or he dies. I understand. The line went dead. Kira sat down heavily, her entire body trembling. Victor appeared in the doorway. It's done, she said. He nodded. Good. Now we wait. The hours crawled by. Alara woke up, oblivious to everything, asking when her father would be home. Kira forced herself to smile, to play, to pretend that everything was fine. But inside, she was breaking. Finally, late afternoon, Victor's phone buzzed. He read the message, then looked at Kira. We've located him. He's being held in a warehouse on the east side. My team is moving into position now. Kira stood. I'm coming with you. No. Yes. Victor's eyes narrowed. This isn't a game. People are going to die tonight. I know. And I'm still coming. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he sighed. Fine. But you stay in the car. You don't move unless I tell you to. Deal. They left Alara with Teresa, who promised to keep her safe, to not let her out of her sight. Kira kissed the girl's forehead, whispering promises she hoped she could keep, then followed Victor out to the car. The drive across the city felt endless. Kira sat in the back seat, her hands clenched into fists, her mind racing with every possible outcome. What if they were too late? What if Raphael was already dead? What if? Stop, Victor said, his eyes meeting hers in the rearview mirror. He's alive, and we're going to get him out. Kira nodded, forcing herself to breathe. They parked 2 blocks away from the warehouse. Victor pulled out his phone, coordinating with his team, his voice low and steady. Then he turned to Kira. Wait here. No matter what you hear, no matter what happens, you stay in this car. Understood? Understood. He nodded, then disappeared into the night. Kira sat in silence, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Minutes passed. Then she heard it. Gunfire. Sharp. Rapid. Echoing through the night. Kira's hands gripped the door handle. She wanted to run. Wanted to help. But she'd made a promise. So she waited. And prayed. The gunfire stopped. Silence fell. Heavy and terrible. Kira sat frozen in the car, her heart hammering, her mind spinning with worst-case scenarios. She counted the seconds. 10, 20, 30. Then, finally, movement. Figures emerged from the darkness. Victor, supporting another man between him and one of his team members. Raphael. Kira threw open the car door and ran. Raphael. He looked up, his face bruised and blooded, his clothes torn. But he was alive. He was alive. She reached him just as Victor helped him into the back seat. Kira climbed in beside him, her hands immediately going to his face, checking for injuries. "You're okay," she breathed. "You're okay." Raphael's hand came up, covering hers. His grip was weak, but it was there. "Kira. I'm here. I'm right here." Victor got into the driver's seat and started the engine. "We need to move. Now." The car pulled away, speeding through the empty streets. Kira kept her hands on Raphael, afraid that if she let go, he would disappear. "Ilara?" Raphael asked, his voice rough. "She's safe. She's with Teresa." Raphael closed his eyes, relief flooding his features. "Thank God." "You're hurt." Kira's voice shook. "We need to get you to a hospital." "No hospitals." Raphael opened his eyes. "Too many questions." "Raphael." "I have a doctor. Victor knows." He looked at Victor in the rearview mirror. "Call him." Victor nodded and made the call. They drove to a private residence on the outskirts of the city. A doctor was already waiting, his medical bag in hand. They brought Raphael inside, and the doctor immediately went to work, stitching wounds, checking for internal injuries, administering pain medication. Kira stood in the corner, watching, her hands shaking. Finally, after what felt like hours, the doctor stepped back. "He'll be fine," he said. "He needs rest. A lot of it, but he'll recover." Kira nearly collapsed with relief. The doctor left, and Victor pulled Kira aside. "Alexei Volkov is dead," he said quietly. "So are most of his men. The ones who survived are running. This is over." Kira nodded, unable to speak. Victor placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did well tonight." "I didn't do anything." "You trusted me. You stayed calm. That's more than most people would have done." He squeezed her shoulder. "Take care of him." Then he left. Kira returned to the room where Raphael lay in bed, his eyes closed, his breathing steady. She sat down beside him carefully, her hand finding his. His eyes opened. "Hi. Hi. I told you I'd come back." Kira's eyes filled with tears. "You almost didn't." "But I did." "Don't ever do that again." Raphael's hand tightened around hers. "I won't. It's over now. We're safe." Kira nodded, tears streaming down her face. "We're safe." Raphael reached up, brushing the tears away. "Come here." Kira carefully lay down beside him, mindful of his injuries. He wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close, and she pressed her face into his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you," he murmured. "I love you too." They lay there in silence, two people who had fought their way through darkness and somehow found each other on the other side. And for the first time in a long time, Kira believed that maybe, just maybe, everything really would be okay. The next morning, they returned to the penthouse. Ilara was waiting, and when she saw her father, she burst into tears and ran to him. Raphael caught her, holding her tightly despite the pain it caused, and Kira watched with her heart full. This was her family now. This was home. If stories like this linger in your heart long after they end, don't leave just yet. Like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below, and let the next story find you when the night grows quiet again. 3 months later, life had settled into something resembling normal. Raphael had recovered fully, the scars on his body fading but never quite disappearing. He was more careful now, more present. The dangerous part of his life hadn't vanished. It never would, but he'd pulled back, delegated more, spent more time at home. More time with them. Kira had changed too. She no longer felt like a guest in the penthouse. She belonged there. She had a place, a purpose. She had a family. Ilara called her by name now, but sometimes, when she was sleepy or scared, she would slip and call her something else. Mom. The first time it happened, Kira had frozen, unsure how to respond. But Raphael had just smiled, and Ilara had continued on as though it was the most natural thing in the world. And maybe it was. One evening, Raphael found Kira in the library. She was curled up in her favorite chair, a book in her lap, the fire crackling softly in the hearth. He sat down on the ottoman in front of her, the same place he'd sat months ago when he'd first told her he loved her. "Can I ask you something?" he said. Kira set down her book. "Of course." Raphael reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Kira's breath caught. "I know this hasn't been a traditional relationship," Raphael said quietly. "I know we've been through more in a few months than most people go through in a lifetime. But I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you." He opened the box. Inside was a ring. Simple. Beautiful. "Marry me," he said. Kira's eyes filled with tears. "Raphael, I know it's fast. I know there are 1,000 reasons to say no. But I love you, and I want you to be part of this family. Officially." Kira stayed at the ring, then at Raphael, then back at the ring. Her mind spun with everything they'd been through, everything they'd survived. And she realized that she didn't need time to think about it. She already knew her answer. "Yes," she whispered. Raphael's face broke into a smile, a real, genuine smile that made him look younger, lighter. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making you happy," he murmured. "You already do." They were married a month later, in a small, private ceremony with only a handful of people present. Ilara stood beside Kira, clutching a bouquet of flowers, her face bright with joy. And when Raphael kissed his bride, sealing their vows, Kira felt something she hadn't felt in years. Complete. The months that followed were the happiest of Kira's life. She woke each morning beside Raphael, spent her days with Ilara, and her nights wrapped in the arms of the man she loved. She still thought about her past sometimes, about the streets, about the cold and the hunger and the fear. But those memories felt distant now, like they belonged to someone else. Because in a way, they did. She wasn't that girl anymore. She was Kira Navarro, wife, mother, home. One night, as they lay in bed, Raphael's arms around her, Kira thought about how far she'd come, how a single phone call had changed everything. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. Raphael's hand moved, tracing patterns on her shoulder. "Regret what?" "Bringing me here, keeping me." Raphael was quiet for a moment. Then he shifted, pulling her closer. "Never. Not for a single second. Even with everything that happened. Especially because of everything that happened." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You saved my daughter. You saved me. You gave us both something we didn't know we needed." "What's that?" "Hope." Kira's eyes filled with tears. "You gave me that too." Raphael held her tighter. "Then we even." They lay there in the darkness, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely way, and Kira realized something. Life didn't have to be perfect to be beautiful. It just had to be real. And this life they'd built together, this family, this love, was the realest thing she'd ever known. The years passed. Ilara grew older, brighter, more confident. She excelled in school, made friends, laughed freely. The trauma of that night in the warehouse faded, replaced by memories of safety, love, warmth. Raphael's business shifted. He stepped back from the more dangerous aspects, focused on legitimate ventures, built something that could be passed down without fear. And Kira flourished. She went back to school, got her degree, started working with organizations that helped homeless youth. She used her story to give others hope, to show them that no matter how dark things seemed, there was always a way forward. She never forgot where she came from, but she also never looked back with regret. Because that girl, that scared, homeless, invisible girl, had led her here, to this life, to this family, to this love. One evening, years later, Kira stood on the balcony of the penthouse, watching the city lights below. Raphael came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Kira smiled. "How lucky I am." "I'm the lucky one." "No." She turned in his arms, looking up at him. "We both are." Raphael leaned down and kissed her, slow and sweet, and Kira felt the same flutter in her chest that she'd felt the very first time. "I love you," he murmured. "I love you too." Behind them, through the glass, they could see Alara in the living room, curled up on the couch with a book, Mr. Bear tucked beside her. Their daughter, their family, their home. And as Kira stood there, wrapped in Raphael's arms, the city glittering below them, she thought about how a single moment, a single choice, could change everything. How finding a scared little girl under a table had led her here. How making a phone call had saved not just one life, but 3. How love, in its strangest form, had become her freedom. And she realized that sometimes the best stories are the ones that start in the dark, because those are the ones where the light, when it finally comes, shines brightest. Time passed. The pain became memory. The fear became strength. The loneliness became belonging. And Kira learned that home wasn't a place. It was the people who made you believe you were worth staying for. The people who saw you, really saw you, and chose you anyway. The people who held your hand in the dark and promised, no matter what, that they would never let go. Raphael had been that for her, and she had been that for him. 2 broken people, finding wholeness in each other. 2 lost souls, discovering that sometimes being found is just the beginning. And as the years stretched on, as their love deepened and their family grew, Kira understood something she hadn't known before. That survival isn't just about making it through the night. It's about learning to see the morning and choosing every single day to walk toward the light. Together, always together,